Okay, welcome back, guys. Um, so here we are. Got what's our system, right? So we just kind of talked about what's our system for project three. And so challenging you to kind of think about that. I'm not looking for the perfect answer, so let's keep that in mind, right? How can we just do a little bit of research to kind of figure out how can we identify what the system is, even if we have to describe it. Doesn't mean we have to go find a very specific labeled group necessarily, right? Because I'll show you that by way of example, kind of in a way. And so, so let's say I'm looking at Wayne State University as my place because my issue is adjunct versus lecturers versus professors being hired, right? So I don't know, those of you who are unaware, a lot of times like in university systems, we're in fewer and fewer professor jobs, right? More and more lectures and even more and more and more adjuncts. All right. So depending on how you feel about that, right? You may feel like, oh, that's a good thing. And in some cases, you might feel like that's not such a good thing, right? Not all adjuncts or not all lecturers may have, possibly the credentials or be studying the thing that they're studying, right? A lot of times this adjuncts and lecturers. I don't want to say it's in cheaper labor, right? They don't have to pay as much. So maybe does that affect quality? Some would argue that. So the system I'd have to look at is university hiring policies and guidelines, or the dean's approval process, or the provost. So there's a lot of systems kind of there in place. As far as systems go, my real challenge in there is going to be changing the mindset, right? Based on, okay, how are we looking at students being prepared and students getting ready, right? If we've got an adjunct who has to sit and let's say teach it two classes over here, three classes over here, four classes over here, five classes over here, whatever, just to make a living, right? Are we really serving our students, right? So I can say the same thing for lecturers, right? Or the same, and then we kind of get to the point where we're talking about, okay, the professor should be just concentrating on focused on his one classes or his set of classes at one place, I guess I should say, right? But that's his or her profession, right? And that's her main focus or something like that, right? And so I'd have to look at that and do some research some more, right? And adjuncts, lecturers, how that trans transpires, right? How it comes to be, right? Understand the system, right? And then figure out what's happening, through some research. You don't necessarily have to do all that research necessarily for this project here, but bring those issues to bear, right? Bring those issues to light. So, okay, here is the system that I would need to be looking at. And the mindset that I feel like I would need to change is how we think about hiring practices, right? Are we thinking about our students? Are we thinking about the best way to serve our students so that they get quality education, right? Versus an adjunct or a lecturer who has to go for quantity just to perhaps string together a good living, perhaps, right? Or do you want people who are really focused in on their particular craft, right? Or subject matter, or their discipline, or their field, we might say. So that's just by way of an example. So here's kind of a thing here, right? Here's our systems, right? Here's our here's our place, here's our issue. So I kind of put a question mark in there to kind of have us thinking, okay, what's the system, right? Where are the mindsets? Where are the minds sitting at, perhaps? Um, Looking right farther upstream, and I realize that when I do to my left, it looks upstream. That you guys are probably the opposite way. So I'm going to try to do this upstream. Upstream. Okay. Anyway, it's not working. Anyway, look upstream, right? How do we look upstream, and where are the systems kind of in place, and where perhaps are the minds and the mindsets already in kind of that we might think are already rooted in, right? They're kind of always doing the thing that they've always done. Recall, like I said, every system's designed to get what it gets, right? So where does the redesign perhaps need to take place in the system? And does that take mindsets? Does it take policy change? What does it take? Right? There's no, like I said, there's no wrong answer, right? I think it's upstream thinking. A lot of times is creative thinking. And even as Heath admits right here in his book, he said, not all upstream thinking necessarily is going to work. The one in Mexico failed miserably, recall, right? So I'm not looking for that when it comes to Project 3. I'm looking for outside of the box, upstream, more specifically, non-linear thinking, in the sense that looking at that thing up here, right, versus looking at it too far down here and getting the same thing, right? Same thing. We do the same work, right? Getting the same results, right? So think about this for your collaborative research proposal. Here's what I'll boil down to the nitty gritty for you, kind of the purpose for these last 2.5